Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The top-ranked heavyweights Jared Anderson and Efe Ajagba will return on a card together, a double-header. They will respectively be facing a Ryad Merhy for Anderson, and Guido Vianello will be the Efe Ajagba opponent. So this card, 13th of April in Corpus Christi, Texas, and this is obviously promoted by Top Rank. So what we'll do, you can see here the press release and the promo poster. We'll get down to some of the quotes and then a few thoughts. So we'll start with Anderson Merhy and then move on to Ajagba Vianello. So it is a case with that second fight with Vianello. I have questioned in the past Top Rank, why were they hanging on to him? And seemingly this is the answer. So getting down to Bob Arum. So he says, Jared Anderson is the most exciting young heavyweight in the world, and he's stepping up against his toughest opponent to date. Corpus Christi is a great fight town, and I can't wait for the fans there to have a front row seat for the future heavyweight champion. Efe Ajagba is one of the division's biggest punchers, but Guido Vianello is a skilled fighter who demanded a step up in competition. If you like heavyweights, this is a can't miss. So we'll get to Anderson, his quote, and then a few thoughts about this fight. So Anderson says this is going to be the start of a big year, and I can't wait to show out in front of the fans in Corpus Christi and everyone watching on ESPN. Merhy is a solid fighter, but he has never faced a heavyweight like me. He'll see that in person on April 13. So Ryad Merhy, as the press release notes, has come off a win over Tony Yoka. Previously, he has lost to the likes of Kevin Lerena not so long ago. Also, he's got a knockout loss earlier in his career at cruiserweight. But he says, after ending 2023 with a great performance, I am looking for another great performance, this time on American soil against the future heavyweight hope. What I like about my current position is that I have nothing to prove. I accepted this fight because I don't see Anderson as a big danger. It's up to him to prove himself against a small heavyweight like me. I feel no pressure. See you April 13, Jared. Hopefully he's coming to fight. He is a decent fighter previously at cruiserweight, and that win against Tony Yoka, that was an upset. Yoka was meant to win that fight. He was meant to restart his career after a couple of losses on the bounce against Martin Bakole and also Carlos Takam, but he couldn't do it. He was outpointed in a split decision win there, 96-94 on two cards. So off the back of that, springboard straight into an American fight, obviously probably also a decent payday coming with that. Jared Anderson is sort of pitched as the heir apparent in terms of American heavyweights coming through, in terms of that generation which is expected to break through soon as the older guard starts to fade away. Anderson has, 24 years old. He sort of said 26, 27, he wants to be out of the game, so he's hoping to move up and take the belts and be in the big fights very, very soon. And this fight, I would not call it a big fight, but I'm not mad at it, but at the same time, I would also say it feels like another sort of treading water fight. Just because you've got a lot happening in the heavyweight division at the moment, a lot of big cards out in Saudi Arabia, a lot of fighters looking for big money opportunities, some of the sort of backlog with the heavyweight division with contenders who've been waiting for the shots. They're either getting in big fights, getting overpaid to fight other contenders. Some of the mess is starting to clear out just a little bit, but Jared Anderson hasn't quite entered that fray. And this fight is not part of that fray. Let me be clear, Ryad Merhy is approaching world level in terms of a heavyweight, but he's not operating at world level. So he's got a record, Merhy, of 32-2. As I mentioned previously, he was stopped by Arzin Gulamarian late on in their fight back in 2018. And also at heavyweight, he's got a loss to Kevin Lerena. That was a 12-round decision loss. So I sort of see this fight as good matchmaking in a way that it keeps Anderson chugging over at a certain level. But it's not the fight that we wanted, and it's not necessarily the name that helps really build his name or reputation. And actually, you can kind of say the last year or so, have they actually struggled to get him the right names or the right sort of opponents to sort of step up? I mean, if he's busy and active, like that Andre Rudenko fight was his third or fourth fight of the year, I can kind of go for one fight, yeah, okay, slight drop down in class. But the Charles Martin fight, he got something from that. But you've got some other fights there where, in the last year or two, it has felt like careful matchmaking at a certain level where it makes him look good, but how much did he really get from it? I mean, a la the Milvan Rovkanan, the Teslenko fight, Vladimir Tereshkin, George Arias, some of these guys he has ended up sort of cutting through like a knife through hot butter. At least he got some rounds against Charles Martin, first time he'd gone the distance, and he was actually sort of tuned up a little bit in that fight, took a couple of shots, and some people have sort of given him the stank eye over that performance. But I think it's good for him to have credible opposition that makes him work, gives him rounds, gives him experience. And in some ways, I kind of see this as another fight that lends itself to that, but it's not necessarily those big fights that he says he's ready for and that he should be in. And they're saying that this is going to be a big year for him. They're starting off with Ryad Merhy. What is the next step? I mean, if anything, the guy that's in the co-main event, Efe Ajagba, that would be a perfect level of fight next for Jared Anderson. But because they have linkages through training camp, trainer, all that sort of stuff, it's probably not going to happen. But that level of opponent, big puncher who's dangerous, you get through, do a number on him, you move on to the world level. Those sort of top 10 fights that Anderson's kind of knocking on the door of. And I think there's just a step between Merhy and a really big fight, and they need to bridge that gap. So I do think that he's going to go in here against the smaller heavyweight and Merhy. I think he will be in control. I think he will dominate and probably even stop Merhy. At the very least, he's going to get a comfortable decision on the cards if it went all the rounds. For Merhy, it's all upside. He has that fight with Tony Yoka, wasn't expected to win. He wins. He gets an opportunity here. So Anderson, yeah, he's going to win this one all day and twice on Sundays. You've got Efe Ajagba in the co-main event. So sneakily, and I said this on a video on Patreon, had one of the best years of any heavyweight in 2023. Stefan Shaw, Zan Kosobutsky, Joe Goodall, all good wins. He was active. He looks like he's improving. And in the form of Guido Vianello, this also is not quite another mark time fight. It's definitely a much tougher fight than that. But I think he is the heavy favorite in this one. He is more physically intimidating and I think athletic than Guido Vianello. I think Vianello probably has a little bit on him in terms of the skill gap, but in terms of power, Efe Ajagba has it all day over Guido Vianello. And Vianello, if he takes a few shots, even a couple of really hard, stiff, straight jabs, he is prone to cutting as well. We saw that in the Johnny Rice fight. And Ajagba, when he lands those long levers, especially from far out, he can do some damage. I think this is another case where we're going to see maybe a relatively competitive fight in terms of, the first few rounds, the action, the back and forth. I think it will be quite good. Vianello will be a little bit slippery and tricky, but I do think eventually he is going to, Efe Ajagba that is, catch up with Guido Vianello and possibly take him out inside about 6 or 7 rounds. Vianello, record of 12-1-1. He's coming off a performance against Moses Johnson just not so long ago, a couple of weeks back. So this fight with Ajagba must have been contingent on him getting through that and taking no damage. He blasted him out in a round. It would have been interesting to know who else were they considering for the Ajagba fight. It must have been even a step down, in terms of opposition from Vianello. So, this is not a bad fight. I think for Ajagba, as he's waiting, sort of like Anderson, to really get into the mix of some of the bigger fights, taking out some other, guys that are hanging around on the periphery, like a Vianello. It keeps him busy and will give him something to think about. And I do think he will get the win here. most likely by stoppage. So Efe Ajagba, I expect him to blast through here. And Vianello at times, because in the bubble back in the pandemic, faced Kingsley eBay, arguably lost that fight. He was actually up against Johnny Rice in a fight that ultimately, due to a cut, he lost. So, he's been a little bit lucky and unlucky in his career, but sometimes, say, against Jay McFarlane, for example, that fight, he just looked kind of really dreadful. So let's hope that the level of opposition here in Ajagba, who's not necessarily a world beater, but he's sort of approaching that world level. He's getting better. He's faced some good opposition of late, and he's looked increasingly good. Vianello has a lot to prove. And if he upset Efe Ajagba, it would be a massive upset and would be a massive boon for his career. But I expect Ajagba to win, and by stoppage. And I also expect Ryad Anderson to get the best of Ryad Merhy. So good heavyweight double header. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.